So these are 30-minute quick talks about all things psychological safety, different deep dives. And so today we're talking about creating psychological safety during change. So let's just get a grounding in what is psychological safety. Psychological safety is a comprehensive understanding of your business and your organization and whether or not people have the ability to make mistakes without risk of harm to themselves or to their career or to their livelihood. Google in 2015 did a huge study, 2-year study, and the outcome of which was looking at what makes a team most effective, high performing, and they found that psychological safety was the #1 differentiator in high functioning, high performing teams. And so that is why we talk about psychological safety. They identified these 6 behaviors of psychologically safe teams. That includes the ability to take risks, disagree, raise problems, ask questions, and make mistakes. And here's Doug. So that is the background of psychological safety. Welcome, Doug. So why is this a risk now? Why are we talking about this now? Well, there's a lot going on, right? And sometimes that change can just be the last straw, the straw that breaks the camel's back, as they say. And so with the volume of changes that people have experienced, it's hard to put our heads around how many things have impacted us as humans. And so, thinking about changes within the context of today's workforce and today's world makes psychological safety an important thing to consider. The other reason is we have a lot of people leaving organizations, which means we have a lot of people joining organizations. And so as we bring in new people, we change the dynamics of our organization. And that experience can be very scary for people and for both the people joining and the people being joined because of the dynamics and how those can change. Another reason why this is a risk now is we're making a lot of investments in businesses, be it in new infrastructure, potentially in, I read an article about how a lot of companies are looking to increase their acquisitions efforts, having to pivot, invest in innovations and technology. If I'm spending a lot of money, I want to see that be successful. And if I'm investing that money and expecting those changes to happen without investing in the capabilities of my team and the ability to absorb that change, then I'm basically taking my money and throwing it out the window. And so we want to make sure that those investments are fruitful and have a good ROI. So that's another reason why this is a big risk now, is because of the volume of change. We'll talk about that, of course, later on. The other one, I'm doing a presentation a couple weeks for a project management symposium. And so I'm talking about psychological safety in projects. And one of the things that I thought was fascinating, I saw this from PMI, 2 out of 3 projects fail. So if that's not a good track record, by the way. So good to know. That's a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources in something that has about a 33% chance of actually working. So that would be a big risk, right? We would call that a big risk. So these are just some of the reasons why this is important now. Okay, Doug, I kicked us off. Welcome. Why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself, actually, and we'll go from there.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's a pleasure to be with you and to learn more about this topic as we discuss it and learn from your experiences as well. My name is Doug Flory, as Alessandria introduced me. I am a practitioner of change management. So I'm very focused on helping people lead and guide them through change especially in the workforce. So it could be, has some examples like she shared. Maybe you're going through merger and acquisition. Perhaps your company just changed their organizational structure. Maybe you changed your job role. Maybe they're introducing a new system or policy. My job is to help focus on how to help you navigate that so you can be successful and not just implement some kind of new technology. And we're here to, what I really want to focus on today is the concept of change management and how we're going through change and psychological safety. And it's almost like when you hear the word change, like if I whisper it, like, does it send goosebumps up your arm? And does it kind of cause some shivers to happen if I just whisper change? Because our natural, I say that a little bit in jest, just because it's a bit of a fearful term, just intrinsically for us as human beings. Change is often characterized as being very hard to do for us. And when we do that, our brains are kind of pre-wired, if you will, or I think a lot of people call it reptilian brain kind of kicks in. And we just want to naturally find that easy path. We want to be on autopilot, and we want to continue to work efficiently, effectively, and easily so that we're not taxed with trying to figure out something new. And this is how this is stressful as we try to learn or maybe unlearn something along the way with that change. So as you're thinking about that, think about how you joined this meeting today. You're now so accustomed to just clicking on a button and joining Zoom, whereas 2 years ago, you had to be like, okay, step one was what? Okay, and step two and step three, and you were like following, but now it's just kind of automated. That's the kind of change that we're talking about that can kind of represent that. Plus, as I mentioned, one of my titles and my roles as a professional is to be a change leader, a change manager. And so for many people here, perhaps on the call, maybe that's your role or your title as well. And that can be a bit daunting to employees when all of a sudden some new guy just joined the company and he wants to talk about changing things. And why does he want to change me? Why does he want to talk to me? What did I do? What's going to happen? I'm a little nervous, So all these things start kicking in, and we have to be very self-aware and bring in EQ into the equation so that we're not inducing a fear and we're creating psychological safety along the way. There's many different questions and concepts of the new that we'll be talking about. That's a few examples.
Can I add real quickly, just again, keeping it casual here. One of the things you just mentioned, not knowing what my job's going to be, not knowing what's happening, not having control over things that are, over my schedule, who I work for, what I do. All of those have been identified as accelerants for burnout. And so while we're talking about psychological safety, it really is a yin and yang of psychological safety and building that individual and independent resiliency. And so how do we foster that workplace? Doug, I don't know if you were ready to go to the next slide or not, but here we are.
Yeah, let's go on to this slide right here. And that's a great point. Thanks for mentioning that, because I was literally just reading an article this morning on LinkedIn, and I could share the link with you if you're interested, but it's basically talking about psychological safety. And I want to highlight this quote. It says, it found in a study that employees who have been given office return ultimatums have the worst levels of work-related stress and anxiety since the survey started in 2020, just before the pandemic. And their declines in work-life balance were twice as steep compared to those who had flexible working options.
Wow.
And that's amazing. I mean,
that is amazing.
It was a perfect timing of reading the article, but it was something that just really resonated with me and I wanted to share. So as we continue to talk about, why is this a risk now, and kind of segueing off that quote, there's a lot of different terms out there, regardless of what you call it. It's about, it could be called remote, hybrid, RTO, hybrid with flexibility, or whatever the term is. It seems like it's always being used interchangeably to some degree. As we think about that from an employee perspective, it can be really nerve-wracking for an employee who's learning that your company required you 3 years ago. Hey, you got to go work from home now. There's no choice. Go work from home. And what I mean by that is maybe it's on your bed, maybe it's in the kitchen table. I don't know, but you got to go do it and make it happen. So we've all gone through that change and we've navigated, and so much has happened since then. But now what we're seeing is, you may think, well, they may want you to come back to work, perhaps. Perhaps they're now deciding on what their strategy is. And that's very stress-inducing, because you've had to make so many different changes as an employee, as an individual, as a parent, especially in this day and age. Those who are parenting through this process right now are probably feeling, I don't want to say the most amount of stress, but a great deal of stress, in the sense that they're trying to take care of their young children. They're now parent, teacher, and principal. They're trying to find caregivers. There's a lot of different impacts that can happen. And we really need to be clear in our communication about valuing our voice of the employee in the decision-making. And if we're doing that, we're really engaging the employees, we're bringing them along on a great journey that can make it really less anxious, less stress, and address that psychological safety. So we really need to do this through empathy building. We can either be, there's a kind of a scale there, and it could be apathy, maybe it's sympathy, or maybe it's empathy. Hopefully you're seeing more and more empathy from leaders as we're all going through this, perhaps from your manager as well, and trying to help you navigate those return to office messages or those strategies that they're developing. Very important, because it's, there's just anxiety in going back to work, because now all of a sudden you're changing, and you have to have that sense of psychological safety there as you're just going back to work, possibly to see your peers, because that can be anxious as well. Any questions or any thoughts so far?
Feel free to pipe in on the chat if you guys have questions or comments. We're going to keep on going.
Yeah. So we all know that there's this mass movement of employees who are, they're voting and with their feet and their voice, and they're choosing to go and live wherever they want. I know I have a colleague who used to live in Boston and chose to go live in a small town in Vermont and work remotely, because that is now a possibility. And as we're seeing that, companies are really starting to determine their workplace strategy. Employees are seeking greater flexibility and revised focus on culture and the ways that they work. But the job search itself can be stress-inducing in its own realm. And we know that as a new employer, or meeting peers, or even just lateral moves within your own company can induce a need for psychological safety. Some companies are starting to make mandates to return to the office. And if you think about the full scope of that decision, it really reverses a lot of things that everybody has already adapted to. And now they're trying to understand, wait, we just did it for 2 years. Why all of a sudden do we have a mandate to go and do something different? Plus I have to go back and commute. I have to readjust to a new model. A lot of this just kind of creates stress, and people want to kind of deal with that. I'll share a recent example of something I just read. I've been following this very closely, and there's been, I'm not going to say any company names, but a large financial institution, the CEO has been very vocal about his position and thinking and strategy on return to work and to the office. And that was the mandate that's been made for quite some time, 6 months probably. Just yesterday, they came out with a new position, and they're going to allow approximately 60% of their staff work remotely. Now they got to figure out what that looks like and who is going to do it. But I think basically what's happened is the voice of the employee and the amount of, I guess, communication
Backlash,
and learning
maybe?
has evolved. Yeah. So it continues to happen there. And as we think about how do we fit into all of this, really is what's really important. We need to understand, how do we fit in? Whether we're pivoting from an office-centric culture to a remote culture or vice versa, it doesn't really matter. It requires a new set of skills and competencies when you're doing this. One of the things that I like to say is that, you know, one of the roles that's really impacted in terms of roles in an organization is the manager level. And as a manager in the office, you are easily able to see your team, see what they're doing, working with them. You had like physical, tangible things you could touch almost, right? And now if they're pivoting to a remote concept of distributed work and they can't do those same things, where they can't see what you're doing or they don't know what you're doing, maybe they start to begin to micromanage a little bit more. Maybe they're always asking you what's going on or something to that effect. My analogy, my metaphor I like to say is that you can't copy paste your skill set from an office culture into a remote culture, because it requires a totally different ability to manage and lead your team to results. And we're seeing some of those opportunities for increasing that skill set to include things like really building trust. And if you think about what trust also is very closely connected to psychological safety, because if you don't have those factors, your team is not going to perform well. They're not going to believe in or follow your vision, your leadership. It can really impact the results. And I've seen that both personally and with some colleagues as well. As we enter the workforce, regardless of how we're trying to do something, we also want to contribute to something greater, not just come in, punch the keys 9 to 5 and do whatever your job is. We want to do something bigger and know that we're making a difference. So we want to do our work well, but we want to see kind of a line of sight. And what I mean by that line of sight is, yes, I come into work 9 to 5 and I punch my keys, but I understand my company's mission. I understand our vision and our purpose. But how does what I do contribute to what the CEO or the CFO or whoever is communicating, like at an all hands or a quarterly meeting, and they're telling you about the latest numbers, figures, and data, and you're trying to understand, okay, did I do something to help with that? Whether it was good or bad. And you're trying to connect those dots as an employee. So how does my work connect to those dots? They always want to work for an employer that has a greater purpose, such as contributing to the environment or to social causes and needs. They want to be able to have charitable acts as an employee. And employees are really trying to attempt to balance a lot in their lives right now. You know, I have some colleagues on my team who are going through a lot. Some examples. Obviously, Eastern Europe comes to mind, with having family and a history and a legacy there. A couple of other examples, people who are in underrepresented groups, and they've seen the violence, or they've seen these movements, social movements on TV, and they're just kind of feeling scared or like, should I go into work? That's a sense of how we need to be able to do that. Or working parents who are trying to care for their elderly parents, or perhaps their young school children. We got to find an ability to balance all of that along the way. I'm going to pause because I see that there's a question in the chat. I'd love to see your responses and thoughts to that. So the question is, how important do you think it is to have personal alignment to the company strategy or mission? Share your thoughts in there, and we'll come back and see the results. So one of the things that I've been able to practice as a change leader, as employees, colleagues, even myself are going through all these changes that we're seeing in the workforce, is the ability to have comfort to ask questions. If you're not able to have that capability, then perhaps you have to understand what the psychological safety of that culture is. As we're leading change, in whatever kind it may be, it's essential for employees to understand the why not. Why do we have to do it right now? And if you don't have an opportunity to understand why we're doing that change, or to provide questions, or to truly have a dialogue around that, it can really impact how you're going to adapt to that change. So we have to consider, what is our communication strategy as we're doing this? We can't just roll it out and say, well, there it is, get on board. You know, we have to really consider the different roles, the different tenures, the different experiences and personas that are involved in that change, and help people to go through that change. So do we wait? Some things to think about as you're thinking about how communication happens in your company could be something like, do we wait until everything is all perfect and packaged up in a bow and pretty little wrapping paper and we have all the answers? Or do we tell you up front, you know, we don't have all the answers yet, but we want to bring you on this journey with us. We'll figure out some stuff and we'll share things along the way so that you feel like you know what's going on. That's quite a different strategy. So think about how your company has been able to do that and what they've done over the last 2 years, regardless if it's about return to the office or any of their various communication styles. Do we deliver updates on a regular basis with a foreknowledge that we don't have all the answers yet? And I think yet is the key word there. So your communication strategy will directly impact not only your resilience, your readiness for change, and your results, but it'll also allow you the ability, hopefully, if you have a good culture and environment, to ask those questions so you understand, to have a dialogue with your manager in one-on-ones or with your team and your peers, and to be able to truly talk about those and help your mindset. We can achieve all of that through a variety of ways. There's FAQs, there's town halls and one-on-ones, poll questions, manager readiness, skip levels. But one of the more valuable things that I've seen and I've been able to leverage to build psychological safety and help people connect over the last 2 years is the use of personas. Personas is an application where instead of highlighting a specific person, you highlight a theme of a group of people, and you try and identify what their attributes and their style is and what connects them commonly. And so it could be something like working at home alone, or maybe it's taking care of elderly parents, working as a parent with young school children, or something to that effect. Maybe you have a roommate. It could be any of those. And we leverage that. And the results were amazing in the sense that we were able to not only communicate about our strategy, but it helped people to connect and say, hey, you're like me. We're just the same. And it really made a difference in terms of the engagement level, the employee psychological safety, and the comfort of how we were able to go through all of that as we think about the use of personas. Last thing I just want to share really quickly, and then we'll address some of your comments perhaps, is, you know, in this day and age, there's a big popular desire to be agile, to move fast. Let's get it done. And I think that that's a part of psychological safety, and here's why. My son has a giant eraser, just like you see on the screen. And it's about like this big. And printed on that eraser in big, huge font is the word mistakes. And you know, he's only 19. So he's growing, he's learning, and constantly having to adjust to what he's learning. And so today, some of those common values like agility, innovation, continuous improvement, change, transformation, those kinds of things that companies are wanting and they're desiring, that requires a bit of safety. Because if you're truly asking somebody to be innovative and to be agile and to go fast and move quick and do that kind of work, then you have to understand that people might make mistakes along the way, because They're trying to learn. They're not trying to make a mistake by design or intent. They're trying to learn something. And if you're able to share those learnings, that's psychological safety. If you're not able to share those learnings and you're fearful, or maybe you're kind of timid to share the answer because I don't know if he's going to, fire me. I don't know how he's going to respond. I don't know if he's going to shame me in front of my peers. Any of that, that's a sense that there isn't psychological safety within your team or within your culture. So you definitely have to have trust. You have to have honesty. You have to have accountability and allowance to be able to do that type of work if that's what they're asking you to do, whether it's a value or just the way they want you to achieve results. So whether we're new employees or new to the workforce or working at a company, psychological safety is part of the unwritten culture. People don't really talk about it. It's becoming more and more popular these days, but people don't write down on a poster, psychological safety. Are you doing it? You don't see that at the corporate office. So make sure that you understand the unwritten ways that occurs.
Awesome, Doug. So a few things that I want to hit on as we wrap up. Obviously, this has to be a two-parter because we got like a whole bunch of other stuff we wanted to talk about too, but we only have 30 minutes. Is continue to look at the structures and processes in your organization. So psychological safety isn't just about behavior. It's also about identifying ways in which we may reinforce the opposite of what we believe to be of value. So if we, for example, if we schedule meetings without space for questions, we don't really encourage people to ask questions, right? If we reward heroic behavior where people go above and beyond and working all hours of the day, all hours of the night, well, then we don't really value work-life balance and we are burning people out and taking advantage of them. So looking at the structures you have in place is part in your organization is part of how you create psychological safety, not just how you interact on an interpersonal in space. Environment. Are there outside factors that are impacting the overall emotional well-being of your employees that would put stress and strain on them? For example, do you have vendors who are difficult to work with, maybe abusive customers? Do we have a strain on supply chain that's limiting our ability to access the resources we need? Is it a tight talent market? Those are all things we need to consider and then build plans around as psychosocial hazards, as they call it formally, but as hazards to the innovation and resiliency and overall change management, change agility of our organization. Okay, we are exactly 30 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. Sorry, Doug. I think we should have a second session. I'll make sure I invite everyone. If you want to follow up with Doug, here's his LinkedIn. Here's mine. My name is, I didn't even introduce myself. I just got started. My name is Dr. Alessandria Polizzi. I'm the CEO of Verdant Consulting. I see Radha and Doug are having a nice chuckle at my usual shenanigans. I run a company called Verdant Consulting. We provide training and certification on psychological safety and resiliency. If you're on an HR team where you also are able to offer a discount on overall well-being package through a company called Kite, and we have the Kite HR well-being app. I also have a dedicated site. You can only get there by attending this event. That's dedicated to psychological safety and has a psychological safety risk calculator that will help you make the business case for investing in psychological safety. Thank you, Doug. On there, you can also access the global guidelines for psychological safety, which are the ISO 45003. In addition, we have plenty of lovely affiliates who partner with us, Doug being one of them, from a wide variety of industries who can partner with you and help you navigate creating psychological safety in your organization. If you enjoyed this session, again, if you go to our psych safety site, you can see the playlist for all of our past events, as well as upcoming ones. We have two coming up on the 11th. We're doing a double feature, which that'll be fun. one on addressing conflict in a psychologically safe way, and then another one on mergers and acquisitions, which is a big thing happening right now. And coming soon, we're actually going to be recording an episode right now. We're going to be offering through our Be Verdant podcast our psychological safety world tour, where we'll be identifying and discussing psychological safety from different parts of the globe to better understand how we can implement these resources in our organizations.
Will there be t-shirts for the world tour? Like
you know me, I love to make a t-shirt. You know I love to make a t-shirt.
Maybe we represent where we're from. You know, I'm from Ukraine, so I could just have my stuff there.
Exactly. Thank you all for joining our session today. Thanks again to our special guest speaker today, Doug. I hope to see you in future events. And thanks everyone. Be safe out there. Bye.